When I was 23 years old, I was working at the #1 morning show, Good Morning America, and I had just been promoted to my dream job in the field and series unit. This meant that I would come up with story ideas, I would travel all over, I would produce remotes and interview people. My first assignment was on July 4th weekend, and it was to go to Dubuque, Iowa, to produce a remote at the Field of Dreams. Now, I'm pretty sure most of you don't know that movie. It's pretty old, but you do recognize this handsome gentleman, Kevin Costner, from Yellowstone, I'm sure. This movie was a movie about baseball and fantasy, about a field that was in the middle of a cornfield, and they play it every 4th of July. I was so excited I called my mom, and my mom was a little nervous because I'm a New York City girl, and I don't really drive. I was more concerned about getting lost. But the next day, I got on a plane, I rented a car, I went out to the site. It looked exactly like this. I met the farmer, Don Larson, and I figured out what my shots would be for the live show the next day. The next morning, I got up at 3:30 a.m. and got on the road. You need to be at a site 3 hours before airtime, so I needed to be there at 4 a.m. What I didn't count on was how dark rural roads are. And I'm trying to remember the directions to this farm, and the air conditioner is just blowing on me. So I go to turn it off, and my hand is on the wheel, and it mimics the movement of me turning off the air condition. I careen off the road, I hit the accelerator instead of the brake in my nervousness, and my car hits something and flips twice, and then goes up and down until it stops in a field in the middle of nowhere in Dubuque, Iowa, on a holiday weekend at 3:30 in the morning before cell phones existed. When the car stopped, the left door was open, and I looked down, and everything above my left thigh, above the muscle, had been sliced open and was sitting in my lap, hanging by a few threads of flesh. My first thought was, my mom is going to kill me. My second thought was, I better do something, or I'm going to bleed to death. I took off my seatbelt, which had saved me from going through the roof of my car, and I took off my shirt, and I put my leg back on, and I tied it up. As I climbed out of this car, I started screaming to God, God, please help me, I'm so scared, God. And I remember being cut off by a wave of darkness like a curtain. And when I came to, I was crouching on the side of the car. And I said, Allison, if you pass out, you're gonna die, because no one's gonna find you. So get up. So I got up, and I somehow found my way back to the road, determined to walk to a farm. Eventually, Randy came in a red car. He was going fishing. And he gave me a lift to a paramedic's home, and from there they called the ambulance. As they were putting braces on me, I said, you need to call Don Larson, here's his number, I'm not showing up. You need to call my mom, this is her number, she's gonna be pissed off. Now you need to give me a painkiller. And they said, we can't give you a painkiller because we don't know what's wrong with you. And I said, well, I'm not talking to you anymore. And as they rolled me into the ambulance, I thought about what they said, and I'm like, what has happened to me? How much damage did I do to myself? So I looked up in this EMT's face, and I'm like, am I gonna be okay? And he says, I hope so. And I'm thinking, that's the wrong answer. Even then I was trying to produce. They sewed my leg back on, it turned black because everything had been severed. ABC flew me back to New York City. I was in the hospital for 6 weeks. They removed the portion of my leg, they skin grafted onto it, they bone grafted into my arm, which had been broken in 4 places and dislocated. My pancreas was damaged, I had broken my ribs, and I had lacerations all over. And I was in physical therapy for 2 years. Now this sounds pretty bad, right? But the worst part was that I lied about the accident. I was so ashamed of having an accident on my first assignment that I was afraid it would ruin my reputation and I would never be sent on another assignment. So I said I swerved to avoid hitting an animal. And I lived with this shame and this lie for years. Eventually I came clean, and what's interesting is nobody was really concerned with how I got into the accident. They were happy I got out of it, and my reputation was fine. It's no wonder that the first class I created at Stanford Graduate School of Business is reputation management, because I really believe that we are not defined by one mistake or one event in our life, that we evolve, and that the more transparent we are and the more we own our experiences, the more we connect to other people. So that story, it catches the attention of the audience, hopefully, It talks about a time when something big happened in my life and how I handled adversity. I think it's memorable. It's the origin story for why I created reputation management. And it's a story that only I can tell. What does the story hopefully tell you about me? Maybe you think, wow, she's really resilient and determined, and she has a good sense of humor, and she showed courage. And wow, she had to learn about how important it is to be transparent so she can evolve and show growth in her life. The unintentional outcome of me telling this story for the first time was that I got hired for a job. I was coming to San Francisco, and I was being interviewed for a job, and the CEO asked me a question that you will all get if you haven't already gotten yet, which is, describe a time when you think you failed. And I don't know why, but for some reason I decided to tell that story. But for the most part, many of us say things like, well, I didn't get that scholarship, or I didn't score that winning goal in volleyball, right? Or I managed the Bobo shop, but I was micromanaging and I didn't feel like I was a good manager. These are somewhat predictable, trite, and sometimes nebulous answers. What I want to encourage you to do is tell your story, because it will differentiate you and it will be memorable. I told her my story. She told me she was in a motorcycle accident. We talked about that. And she offered me the job on the spot. I don't think it was because of the story and because I tied up my leg, although I think she was impressed. I think it's because she felt connected to me. And she knew me in a deeper way than she probably knew with other people she had talked to. The power of storytelling is that it can synthesize complex processes and funnel it down to what's really important. People will remember your stories. I bet you that one of you will be able to leave here and repeat my story to someone else. It may not be the exact details, but it'll be close enough. Stories create emotions in people, and that is what leads to the action you're hoping for. What I think is if you have passions other than coding, maybe you're a musician, right? Your stories will let people see other facets of you that they didn't know already. And I just think it helps you network and connect with people and create new opportunities for you. Storytelling combats stereotyping. Let's face it, when people meet you, they take you in a thin sliver. They know, they see what your gender is, what your race is, what your age is, and then they see how you're dressed and maybe how you talk, and then they make assumptions. And they put you in a box that makes it easy for them to understand you, not because they're being judgmental, but because they have so much stimulus coming at them. But it's your job to squash the stereotypes, and by telling a story, then they'll realize, wow, I got it wrong. Like, let's say there's someone who speaks a different language, and they don't talk much, and they seem shy, and you think maybe they're not that smart, or maybe they're not that interested. But then they tell their story that they came over to the United States when they were in 9th grade without speaking a word of English, and they learned by observing people and watching TV, and they actually speak 3 languages. Wow, all of a sudden, that person is a hero. Also, your story differentiates you from anybody else. We are all going to be trying to get the same jobs, the same internships, the same recommendations to go to certain colleges. The only thing that you can own is your story to make you stand out. Experts agree that when you wrap data into a story, you're 22 times more likely to remember it, that 63% of people can repeat a story as opposed to statistics. There's a 400% increase in memory when you add imagery to your story. And then for TED Talk speakers, most of them do 60% story for a reason. This is the question that you're all going to get. By a show of hands, how many people have ever been asked this question? Yeah, you're going to be asked it a lot more. Whether it's for a job interview or an internship or on a college application or on a dating app. Too young for that. And what I want to encourage you to is to dig deep and figure out who you are and what you want to share with people. So I had a student who had to do one of my assignments, which was, I want you to tell me who you are, what you're passionate about, and what you want us to do. Persuade us to do something. So this student loved the environment, and he knew a lot, and he wanted to convince us to pick up litter and recycle. And he just went with a lot of different statistics. He was certainly an expert on the environment, there was no doubt, but at the end, I didn't feel like I wanted to take any action. And I said to him, I don't feel like I know you. I have no idea why you care about the environment. And for me to care, I need to know why you care. I said, what if you did something like this? When I was a little boy, I used to walk on the beach with my grandma every Saturday. And that was our time. We'd catch up on our lives, on school, on grandpa. And it was a very special time. One Saturday, as we were walking along the beach, we saw that a seal had washed up on the shore and had plastic around its neck. And it was dead. And my grandma and I were horrified. And from that moment on, I picked up every piece of litter off of the beach and on the streets. Now that's a made-up story. Thank you very much. And I was happy to lend it to him, but I said to him, you have a story like that. What is your origin of why you care about the environment? What is that watershed moment for you? That is what is going to give you credibility. That is what is going to show us that you walk the walk. And that is what's going to inspire me to take action. Where do you find stories? This is the easy part. Family. They're going to say, oh my God, I remember when you were 1 year old and you just picked up the guitar even before you spoke and were strumming out a tune. Or I remember you used to take apart every electronic thing in our home. I knew you were going to be an engineer. Your friends tell you your superpowers. They can say, oh my God, you do calculations in your head without even writing them down. You're the one who needs to figure out who pays what on this bill. Embarrassing moments, even though they feel vulnerable, are almost the most effective because people trust you more and they feel more connected and empathetic. When you travel and you go see a new culture or you challenge yourself to that big hike, those are wonderful things to do, to mine for stories. And finally, I'm sure all of you at some point have had a summer job or an internship, how you dealt with people, difficult conversations, being forward-facing. Those are all stories that you can share. I want you to turn the lens inward and figure out what is my origin story and how can I leverage it. And I'm going to pass that. This is very helpful to some of you who are more linear thinking, but people always say, Allison, I don't know how to keep track of them. And I say, make a chart like this. These are 5 archetypes of stories, and there are many, many more. The essence story is a window into who you are as a person that shows why you are the way you are. The crucible story is a moment in your life when you've had to step out of your comfort zone, as I'm sure many of you have, and when you needed to succeed or fight. Leadership, when you led somebody or a group of people through something difficult. The helper story, where we've shown compassion and empathy and helped other people, even despite how we're feeling. And finally, a pie-in-the-face story is when we are fallible and human, and that's where I would put my car accident story, because I want to show people that I've made mistakes, and I've recovered, and I've learned from it. So I'm going to use my 2 sons as an example. My son, Logan, whose birthday is today, and he's just got dropped off at college in the fall. He wants to be in food science, and he read an article about a coffee lab that was in Menlo Park, and he came to me, he's like, I'm going to reach out, and I'm going to try to get an internship. So he wrote a quick email, hi, my name is Logan Shaw, I go to Mid-Penn, I love food science, I read about you, I'd love to have an internship. And he shows it to me. And I said, oops. And I said, well, that sounds like something anybody could write, and you could substitute anybody's name in it. Why don't you tell them who you are and why you care about food and beverage and what you've done? So my husband is a food entrepreneur, and he's created 4 or 5 different brands. My kids grew up trying all the products, helping us sell them, stacking shelves, right? Advocating for them. And Logan joined a group called Rising Gastronomers, which is a teen-owned company that caters and prepares food, where he prepared menus and food and served it at events. And then that led to him working at festivals, talking to community members to join, and also why it's so important to be aware of allergies, because he's gluten-free. I said, look at how much you have to tell about yourself. So why don't you share this with them and put the pictures in? He did it, and a half an hour later, he got a reply. Logan, it's so great to learn about you and your passion for food. We'd love to meet you next week. My other son, who's sitting somewhere here, I'm not going to point him out. He's very embarrassed right now. He loves animals, and he really wants to be a veterinarian. It's one of his interests. And we had the same discussion because he's also looking at opportunities. And his first step was he went to a horse camp during COVID. And for that week, he learned all about horses, but he loved it so much he volunteered for the rest of the summer to groom and feed and walk the dogs. And then he decided, I'm going to take up riding. I love horses so much. And he even leased half a horse and did shows and won medals, and he loved it. And then he worked at our veterinarians during the summer, and he found a course at the University of Houston where he would learn how to take care of animals and diagnose them and vaccinate them and suture them. That's his story. And so when he was looking for opportunities, he put together this origin story with pictures, and now he works at Pets in Need and the Junior Museum and Zoo, among other things he does. What I want to encourage you all to do is, again, look inwards and make your story succinct, descriptive, and memorable. If you can wrap your story like a little package that you can give to someone else so that they can advocate for you or give you an opportunity or refer you, you're going to get more opportunities during these next crucial years. So, to craft your own story, I want you to ask yourself these questions. Who are you? Why do you care about what you are doing and want to do in the future? Why should we care about that? Are there any visuals to back this up so we can see you walking the walk? And finally, what is your call to action? Be specific so people can actually help you. I want to thank you so much for listening. Appreciate it.